Hey ladies, welcome back to the show. I am your host, Trisha Stefankowitz, registered dietitian nutritionist. On our episode today, I wanted to talk about this idea of having all this knowledge in our head and not being able to translate it into making action in our life. As women, I feel like we are so smart and we get to this place that we are like, yeah, I'm going to finally do this one thing that I've been trying to do forever and I'm going to achieve it. And we study it and we research it, but yet we can't seem to translate it into actually making it happen. And no matter what it is that we've done. So, I want to talk about the ABCs of starting to create behavior change that can take you from an idea of having all this knowledge in your head and actually translate it into the doing part. So, listen in for some tips. Before we start the episode, I want to ask you to share with me any topics that you feel like you would benefit from learning about. This podcast is meant to be for you, for women like you. So if there is something that you want to talk about and you want me to explore or, just kind of touch base about it, please email me at info@trishard.com or find me on Whole Health Empowerment Project at Instagram. The handle is at Whole Health Empower. Okay, now on to the episode. So I feel like we are in this place, a lot of women, where we really decide that we want to do something different, right? We may feel like we're pretty well versed in the topic. So I think for a lot of women, knowledge is really likely something that comes easy for us, right? Like we may read a few articles that we find on the internet. We may see some articles about what it is. We investigate what it is we're trying to change. So, for instance, if sleep is something that is important to you, right? You may be in this place that you're like, okay, I want to get enough sleep. I want to reduce inflammation that's happening because I'm not sleeping enough. I don't feel that great. You may study all the benefits of sleep, you know them inside out. You may know the consequences and feel the consequences of not getting enough sleep. You really are desiring, like in your head, you kind of have like a plan that you are like, you have a whole plan of how you're going to make this happen, that you are going to make sleep a priority. And then you're unable to do it. Like you're unable to get to a place that the action happens. And if it does happen, maybe you're unable to do it consistently. So even though we have all this knowledge, you're really well versed in what it is you want to do. It's like you can't get a hold of this whole like doing part, the real like nitty gritty, the real like behavior change part. That seems to be like the hardest part, right? So this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about this idea of how it can be super frustrating to have all this knowledge in your head, but somehow you just can't translate that knowledge into making that action happen. And so without, we can have all the knowledge in the world, but if there's no action behind it, the behavior is not going to change. And so this idea of doing and trying to figure out how to translate that knowledge into doing is what we're going to talk about today. And it's going to be called like the ABC. So we'll talk all about it. So gaining knowledge, especially I think for us busy women, is really easier than actually changing a habit. Gaining knowledge is really this idea of like understanding why something is becoming important to us, is important to us at this particular time. Gaining knowledge might be something that allows us to see why this change is necessary for our life. But having all this knowledge is one thing. It doesn't really require that much effort, right? I mean, sure, it requires a little bit of effort going on the internet and doing it. But like it doesn't require it, doing it is going to require much more knowledge. So knowing what to do because you have that knowledge and you've been educated doesn't always translate into having that behavior change that you want. Doing it, the actual action part, requires this like extra step of initiating and planning a roadmap of how you want to achieve the goals that you desire. And the thing with the action part is that it requires effort and consistency. And I think that's what probably makes it a lot harder to do because also with the action part, there is a lot of emotions involved in it. Um, and that may impede what it is and may allow us to um, make the action not happen, right? So like if you're just trying to gain knowledge, that's easier because there's no judgment in it. You're just like going about your day, learning things, picking it up, storing it in your brain. But when you're actually getting to a place that you're trying to take action, that's when it gets harder because then like the things that we've told ourselves, the things that are holding us back, overwhelm, judgment, all those things that we feel about ourselves then start to kind of like trickle out and they impede or they help us get to a place that we can take action. So let's talk about these ABCs of creating lasting change or creating that bridge from knowing what to do into actually making the action happen. So the A here is going to be awareness and then after that, action. So there's actually two A's here. So you may today be in a place where you are aware of a behavior that you want to change, whether it's getting more sleep, whether it's eating more fruits and veggies, whether it's drinking more water, whether it's to stop or reduce the amount of emotional eating you're doing. Most of you have an action that you want to do. You may have explored it. You probably have what you need, the risks, the benefits, the challenges. But my guess is you already know what the challenges are because you've probably had past experiences of when you were able to achieve this goal, or maybe you weren't able to achieve the goal. I feel like as women, we're really good at setting health goals or having been in a place that we've made health changes along our life. I think for most women, we're always kind of like working on our health in some degree, but the definition of what is important to your health may change according to wherever you're at in your life. So, awareness is kind of being in a place that you're having some, knowledge that you're able to ask yourself some tough questions and kind of be honest with yourself about what the answers are. And it's important to have this idea of where you're at so that you can figure out how much you're willing to do today, how ready you are. Because a lot of times we do this thing that we have all this knowledge, but we may not be aware of how willing we are to make the changes. We may be in a place that we're not ready. We may be in a place that maybe there's a lot of stuff happening in our life. So even though we feel ready, there's some things that are barriers to having us make this change occur. And that's okay. It's just this idea of knowing where we're at and having awareness about it because like it's different to say that like why put all that effort in when you're setting yourself up that you're not in a place that you can make it happen. And so I'm going to ask you some questions so that we can create awareness because really being honest with yourself here and not having any judgment or any emotion, which is going to be the hard part here, is going to really allow us to see how aware we are. And the questions that I'm going to ask you are really going to help you focus on what you can do and what you're willing to do right now at this particular time. So I'm just going to ask a couple questions, okay? And I want you to think about them. And so let's first think about the one thing it is that you want to change. I would just take one behavior that you want to focus on. I feel like a lot of us do this thing where we want to do a million things, whether it's we want to sleep more, whether we want to exercise more, whether we want to eat more fruits and vegetables and drink more water. It tends to be a whole bunch of things at one particular time. But let's just focus on one thing right now. And then once we are able to get that one change down, then we can focus on more and more changes. But having the one thing under your belt is going to be really helpful because it'll really get you to a place that you feel more confident to be able to make the changes over time because you've put the effort in and you've been able to do it once. So it reaffirms that belief in yourself that you can continue to build onto those habits and make that change happen. So the first question I'm going to ask you is when you think about the behavior that you want to do, right? Is this the way you want your life to be, right? So if you're not sleeping enough, is this the way you want your life to be? Do you want to be in a place that you're consistently not going to sleep enough, right? Or will changing this behavior somehow make your life easier? Okay, so when we talk about sleep, sure, sure, maybe you want to get more sleep, but that it doesn't bother you. There's no consequence of not getting enough sleep. And so it may not be something that you want to change now because there's no effect in doing that. But if somehow getting more sleep helps you through your day, it helps you feel more emotionally connected to yourself, more emotionally connected to your children. It helps eliminate some of the stress and the burden of your day because you feel more in control, then that's very different. You're going to be probably much more willing to want to do that behavior because you can see the benefit of it. And so think about what behavior you want to change and think about like is it acceptable? Like is it okay that you continue to do it? Or will changing this behavior somehow make your life easier or better in some way? So that's the first question. The second question I want to ask you is that if you don't change this behavior right now, so if you decide to keep everything the same and not take any action, what will your future look like in the long run? How will it impact your future? So let's keep going with the sleep example. So if you were to continue not to get enough sleep, would that be okay with you? Does it change your future in the long run? Does it impact your future? Does it make it better? Does it make it worse? I think a lot of us really only ask ourselves this question when it's something related to our health. And more specifically, when it's related to like our health, like a disease state, right? So I think that if you're somebody who has been diagnosed with diabetes and you don't want to take insulin medication or any kind of medicine for your diabetes, that is really easy to see in the long run, right? That like you may be on medications and you don't want to be on medications, or perhaps you can see the consequences of not having your diabetes controlled, right? You can get to a place that you probably don't feel that great. You're gonna just not feel that great. Your blood sugar could be all over the place, or the really long term consequence of not having controlled blood sugar would be you could get renal disease or be on dialysis, or you could get wounds on your feet that don't heal. And so I think when it's like a disease state, it's a little bit easier to see it for what it is. But I really want you to take the time to, whatever it is, the change that you want to do, figure out like if it's something that if you don't change, what does your future look like? Because this is really going to help identify if it's a goal that you want to do or if you want to revisit and do something else. And then I want you to then think of the opposite of this emotion and decide that if you do make this change, what does your future look like? So, with the diabetes example, if you do work on your blood sugar and take your medicine consistently, if you do get to a place that you are eating less carbohydrates, maybe you're able to, you know, maybe you're able to get to a place that you're not on as much medication and that you feel better. And perhaps because you're following the diabetic diet, you lose weight too. So there are two very different pictures of what it looks like if you don't make the change and what it looks like if you do make the change. And so that's where I want you to start is really to kind of be honest with yourself about what your future would look like if you make that change and what it would look like if you kept doing what you're doing, and then what it would look like if you decided to do something different and you chose to do something different, how would your life look? Because ultimately, what I want to really focus on is having this idea that every day you make a decision about if what you're doing is bringing you closer to the goal that you want or it's bringing you further away from the goal that you want. And so, identifying the behavior and the habit that you want to do and identifying its impact on your life. Because if it's something like, and really being honest with yourself here, because you're not going to be able to make a change unless you can really see it for what it is and to be honest about it. I think a lot of times we set ourselves up that we are going to make all these changes and we don't have any awareness into the patterns of our past or how we're actually going to make things happen. And I just think that we're not really that honest about and ask ourselves these questions about what it is that we're willing to do. And no matter what, answering these questions is going to allow you to start thinking about what the next step it is that you can do and what it is that you can do today to get you closer to your goal. And by the way, asking yourself those questions is also helpful to know if you are ready. And if you're not, that's okay. Because if you're not ready, then at least you're not putting all this effort into something that is going to ultimately fail. You have that. And so I really want you to take your time to ask yourself some of these questions. And if you don't ask yourself some questions, perhaps that's telling you something there too. Perhaps that's telling you that you're not ready to take that step forward and that, maybe you're just not ready. You want to wait a little bit more time. But I don't think that waiting, all of a sudden you're going to create this awareness. It's in the action that you're going to become more aware and more honest with yourself and less judgmental about what it is that you can do. I don't know that you're ever going to get to a place that all of a sudden this awareness comes to you. I think it's that taking some kind of action today is going to get you closer to what it is you want to achieve. And so that's the awareness part, is hopefully the awareness here will start to spark some kind of action in you. And the action may not be anything big, and that's okay. The action that you do today may just be trying to answer those questions in your head and trying to be honest with yourself about them. Because again, whatever you answer, there's no judgment in it. If you're not ready to take action, you're not willing to, and you're just not willing to answer those questions, then maybe that's telling you that you're not ready to make that goal a priority. And so you set it aside and you do something else. But at least you don't feel like you failed because it's not something that you're willing to deal with or choosing to do at this particular time. And that's okay. But perhaps you answer those questions and you're like, okay, I think I know what they are and I can see my why and the reason why I'm doing this, and I can visualize what happens if I don't do it. Now it's time to take action. And you might be scared and you may be not even know where to start, but maybe it's just that you do something today. And that something today that you could have done was that you are answering those questions. And then the next day, if it's sleep is something that you want to achieve, because that's the goal, that's the example that we've been using, then maybe the first step that you do is a really tiny action, like, making your bed or having your bed be a place that there's not all clothes at the end of it. That's what my bed looks like. I don't know if that's your bed. So maybe that's the first step, is clearing that out. Or maybe it's something that's even simpler. Maybe it's just making the temperature in your house cool enough that you can sleep. Or maybe it's turning off some lights in your house and making it dark enough. Or maybe it's just putting your phone further away from you so that you don't see the light. And so these kinds of things are the little tiny, tiny steps that are going to get you to a place that if you practice them consistently, they are going to get you to where you need to be. Again, the action doesn't have to be this huge action. And I think that's where we get caught up. It has to be this big ordeal. But I find that when we do that, when we make it so big, sometimes we just don't get to a place that we actually make that happen. So make the action be something really small at the beginning, especially if you're really hesitant about taking action. And then over time, start to keep building on that behavior of that. So perhaps today you turn down the temperature first and you're like, okay, I can do that. I practice that a couple of nights in a row. Then the next night, you turn off all the lights or you have a little night light. Maybe you do that for a week. And then maybe the next week, you decide that you're going to put your phone in a different outlet and charge it. Great. Maybe the next week, you decide, I'm going to go to bed 15 minutes earlier. Great. So it's like all of these things, I think there's all these little steps that we need to do before we get to a place that the action becomes achievable and that gets to a place that we are ultimately hitting our goal. But all of these really small steps that we're doing along the way are going to get us to a place that we get to the ultimate goal that we have. But it's just this idea of making it small enough and taking action all the time consistently that it helps create the roadmap and it helps create the plan that is really going to be unique to you. And so the first step is having the awareness of what your willingness is to do without judgment and just trying to figure out what the consequences of not doing it look like, answering those questions, and then taking it and deciding today that you're going to do something really, really tiny. It doesn't matter. It just has to be the tiniest thing that you can do and that you can do and that you can repeat. I think sometimes questions are really helpful because it lets us to start thinking about solutions to our problems. And it really allows us to maybe uncover some of the things that maybe weren't allowing us to take action before. So first of all, today, ask yourself some questions and then, just trying to figure out the tiniest thing that you can do to make that happen. Doesn't matter how small it is. It doesn't matter. It's just that you're doing something. Okay, now we're going to get to the B. So the B is the belief, right? What you believe about yourself is going to have an impact on if you're able to make those behavior changes happen. So a lot of times I think we decide that we want to make this change, but there is like this doubt in the back of our head, or even we might even be doing this self-talk that we're saying, I'm never going to be able to do it. Why do I think I can do it? But it's this idea of knowing what your beliefs are, or just kind of listening to what you're telling yourself so that you can really start to figure out if somehow these beliefs are hindering the knowledge that you have into making it into an action. And so what you believe about yourself is going to have an impact on the behaviors over time. And so I think that what happens is that we might be in this place that we can change the behavior for a few days, but we're not able to maintain it for the longer time because those beliefs don't align with what we're thinking and saying to ourselves. So you can say to yourself, okay, I can do this one thing for a day or two. But if you're having this, action where you're like discrediting yourself or telling yourself that you can't do it, it's going to be really hard for you to keep arguing with yourself day over day, day after day after day to make that behavior happen. So what I would say is, and I've talked about this in here, is starting to have this conversation with yourself about your beliefs, because I think a lot of times we have these beliefs that we carry around with us, and they may not even be true. It's just things that we've told ourselves, or the influences that we've had over time, or or what people have told us that we've internalized and made them a belief about ourselves. We've never challenged them. I have an episode, and I'll put it in the show notes, about beliefs. I can't remember what the number is, but I want you to start thinking about the beliefs that you have about yourself, because, in order for true change to occur, there's going to be some kind of transformation in your identity. And so if you are in a place that you're not really aware of that, or or if it becomes in conflict of who you want to be, it might be really hard for that change to happen over time. So, how do you align the behavior that you want to do with the identity that you're trying to create, right? So the action of doing the behavior will create the identity that you want. And so you're going to have to start to believe that you can do it in order to be the person that you want to do. And the more evidence you show yourself that you can do something, the more you'll be able to make that happen. And so this might be something I feel like it's this idea of being aware of what your beliefs are. So first asking yourself the questions that we did in the A part, and then trying to challenging some of the beliefs that you may have. For me, I've talked a lot on this podcast about therapy because for me, I had all these beliefs that I had about myself that I didn't even know that I had. And so over time, the more I would do therapy, the more I would realize that there are these like beliefs that I had that were hindering the progress that I wanted to make. And so if I was constantly telling myself, oh, you're so stupid, you're not smart enough, you can't do this, then it's such a challenge for me to be able to accomplish those goals because of that negative self talk that keeps getting in the way. And so perhaps you're somebody who needs to pursue therapy, or maybe you're somebody who's identified some of those limiting beliefs that you have. Well, now I would say some of the things are to kind of what you're telling yourself every day and challenging those thoughts. So, again, this isn't in my scope of practice. I don't do therapy, I can do the nutrition piece of it. But when I talk about it in here, it's mostly based on my experience. And so for me, it's very hard for me every day to have that positive talk. And what works for me is doing some kind of meditation. I can include that in my show notes too. Getting to a place that I can connect with how I feel. And then also doing something so silly that I think felt so silly to me at the beginning is having some kind of affirmation. And so for me, I'm practicing that I'm not going to be critical of myself and making that an affirmation that I do every day. Because it's like I need the reminder every single day that I can do something. And so perhaps one of the actions that you take today that may seem very small, but in the long run could be very big in your life, is to think of a belief or create something. Like one that I use for myself, an affirmation is I approve of myself and I will not criticize myself. And so over time, the more I tell myself that and the more I challenge those beliefs, it becomes a little bit more of a belief that I'm creating that's more positive than carrying around all of the negative stuff that I have. So if you're somebody who doesn't know what your belief is, maybe really starting to think about that or seeking the help of a therapist that can help you with that. Or if you know what your beliefs are, trying to find some kind of affirmation or some kind of challenge to the belief that's holding you back from getting to a place that you're able to move forward with the behavior that you really want to change. And so, again, I'll use sleep as an example. If you're in a place that you think, um, I don't need enough sleep, I don't really require that much sleep, um, I'm too busy to get enough sleep, it's going to be very hard for you then to make sleep a priority because you're telling yourself that you don't need it, that it's not that important. Um, you know, I just think if you were able to reframe that and say, sleep is really important for me, I feel better when I have sleep, that's going to be something that's probably going to be able to make you have that and achieve that behavior in the long run. So, really challenging the beliefs that you have around the behavior that you want to achieve. And lastly, consistency. So, our ABCs is, this is the C part of it, the consistency. So when we talk about behavior change, the repetition of the action is where the true behavior change occurs. So you have the awareness of the action that you want to do. You've now challenged the belief. Well, now it's making that action happen as much as you can make it happen. And this is the really unglamorous part, but this is the part that where all the magic happens. This is the part where you make a commitment to yourself that most days you're going to try to achieve this goal. This is where you start asking yourself, every day, did I do one thing today that was going to take me to that goal? And really re-examining every single day if you've done that. I have a practice that I use for my own goals where I make myself every day kind of look at like what my goal is for that day. And then at the end of the day, trying to evaluate, did I do something today to take me closer to that goal or not? Am I actually further away from that goal? And that really simple action has helped keep me consistent in doing that, because I think most of us, we don't really evaluate our day. And I'm right there with you. I've had seasons, and recently seasons, where I'm just like, I can barely get through the day. I'm hanging on. That the last thing I can feel like doing is to actually be like, hey, let me reevaluate my day. But that one simple question really makes a big difference and really gets to a place where it can shift my awareness. And so perhaps that's something that you can ask yourself every day to help make you feel more consistent in what you're doing. Consistently doing that behavior, no matter how small it is the key to creating that lasting change that you want. It's going to be the key to and the bridge from knowledge to action. So having awareness, challenging the beliefs, and then creating consistency. So it's the act of the behavior, not how good you do it. So the other part of consistency is letting go of the perfection of it. So it doesn't matter that it's not perfect, it's just that you do it. And so if you are, again, using the example of sleep, if your goal is to have 8 hours of sleep and your baseline is 5 hours of sleep, well, if you did 6 hours of sleep, that's progress. If you did 5.5 hours of sleep, that's progress. So it's just letting go that it might not be perfect. You're not going to get 8 hours of sleep every night, but you did something about it to make and get you closer to your goal, because maybe you slept a half an hour longer than you did. Maybe you took the clothes off the bottom of your bed. Maybe you did these little things, and that's what it is. It's just having that consistency over time. It doesn't matter if you sleep 8 hours for 2 days, but then the other days you sleep 5 hours. That's not what matters. And so, for every change that you're doing, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be progress and consistency. Anything that you do that's beyond what you were doing before is progress. And progress and consistency is going to be what is going to get you to where you want to be. All of this thing, I think consistency is really helpful in that it helps create a habit. It will help keep you motivated in times when it feels hard. And it's going to help you feel more comfortable that you can do something. It's going to challenge the beliefs that you have. It's going to get you to a place that you're being more of the person that you want to be. And by the way, there's no difference in the person that you want to be and the person that you are today, beyond the fact that you may have more awareness, you may have beliefs that are challenged, and you may have more consistency. And so now that you know what to do, and we've been talking about these ABCs, the awareness slash action when you get to a place that you're ready, challenging your beliefs and having consistency, this is really the key of knowing what to do and the bridge of getting to action. So it's the knowledge, the ABCs, and the action that happens. So let's today think about something that you can do to take actions, challenge any beliefs that you have, and be consistent with the goal that you want to achieve. It's going to require you to become aware of your beliefs, align them with your identity, who you wish to become, and to be consistent with your actions. All of this whole journey is not about being perfect. It's about being 1% better each day. And so I really want to thank you for listening to this podcast. If you think that someone would benefit from this episode, please share that with them so that we can further this mission of empowering women to take action when it comes to our health. So for you today, what is the one thing that you are going to do that's going to get you to the goal that you desire? Just answer the questions and figure out one tiny thing that you can do. Okay? So we'll talk more about consistency in the upcoming weeks. And again, if you feel like someone would benefit from this podcast, please share it with them. Because together, the more women that we have involved in this mission, we can create a safe space for taking imperfect action to create the whole health we desire and, by the way, that we deserve to have. So I thank you for listening, and I will see you back here next week.